And we are live on a Saturday morning before the NFL Week 2 regular season officially gets underway. I know a Thursday night game just recently happened, but that wasn't football. That was like two high school teams playing. And my special guest, Jacob from Pulse of the Pack, would probably agree with me on the game that happened last night, or excuse me, Thursday night. So Jacob, welcome to the show. I appreciate you coming in here.
Thanks for having me, Dan. It's good to be back. I know I was here probably before the preseason started, but absolutely agree. Thursday night, that's one of the worst games I've ever seen.
It was so bad that Deshaun Watson ran for a touchdown. That's how bad that game was. What we're doing today is we are doing a Falcons versus Packers collab video, but more or less just a discussion on what we think, as Jacob is a huge Packers fan and I'm a huge Falcons fan, but our keys to the game, talk a little bit about who's probably got the edge for this game, and the discussion over the week that was leading up to this game. So with that being said, Jake, why don't you go ahead and plug your stuff? I know I put it in the description of the video, but please go ahead and plug your stuff.
Yeah, go ahead and check it out. It's Pulse of the Pack, and I have a couple videos up, one on Ty Montgomery and one on Mike Daniels. Those of you that are into fantasy football will probably really like the Ty Montgomery one, because he was kind of one of those mid-round picks for your running back position, because he was kind of, he's probably not your number one running back, but maybe he's a really good number two that turns into a number one. And Mike Daniels just lit the world on fire last week against the Seattle Seahawks. He was incredible. But yeah, you can check that out. It's Pulse of the Pack. Hit that subscribe button and let me know what you think of everything, and I'll have more stuff as the weeks progress here, obviously as the season goes on.
Yeah, I'm going to have a Brooks Reed video for you guys by tonight. And if that's up and going, then we'll have a sort of the key to the Falcons beating the Bears last week, which, by the way, let's go ahead and just recap what happened in Week 1. The Atlanta Falcons beat the Chicago Bears on a last-minute sack near the 10-yard line. We thought we were going to lose that game. The Bears seemed to bait us into playing small field ball, and then were able to stretch us out something that I didn't see from the Packers in the Seattle game. But Jacob, what happened to your team week 1?
They won 17-9, and it was not the prettiest game. Probably not a game you're used to seeing if you're a Packers fan or even just a casual NFL fan, because the Packers won what was a defensive slugfest. The biggest play of the game was Mike Daniels stripping Russell Wilson. And before that, the Packers hadn't done much offensively, but every possession after that drive either resulted in points or running the clock out. So it was nice to see for everybody, because obviously before that game, the last time they saw the Packers defense was them getting run off the field by the Falcons in the NFC Championship game. Seattle's not a great offense, but they do have some weapons that are dangerous. Their run defense looked really good, and their pass rush, which is probably the biggest concern for the Packers coming into the year, it looked really good. They were able to do a lot of things to disrupt Russell Wilson, and it was nice to see. But Mike Daniels definitely player of the game last week, and a big NFC showdown between two teams goes Green Bay's way on their home field. So that's how you want to start, as Mike McCarthy would probably put it.
It was a good chance for the Packers to go ahead and get a win over a team that's obviously going to be competing in the playoffs at the end of this year. I have full confidence that Seattle will show up in the playoffs by the end of the year. And it's good to have an edge over them already, one tiebreaker against them if things do actually get tight as we get farther down the road. And for but for playoff positioning, it's good to go ahead and beat a team like that. In Atlanta's case, having a close game against the Bears looked like the Atlanta Falcons were in dress rehearsal for the second week in a row, or the third week in a row if you're counting actual dress rehearsal being the third preseason game. But the Falcons looked like they were just kind of anemic on offense towards the end of the game. At the beginning of the game, it looked like the same old Falcons offense we've seen 100 times before. Able to run the ball effectively, at least to a point, and they were able to throw the ball on the Bears at will. And as the game progressed, it seemed that the script was really more of a bait by the Chicago Bears, and the Falcons wanted to run the clock out more than they wanted to actually handle the Bears and score at will, which is what they can do. So, in my mind, looking at the Atlanta Falcons against the Chicago Bears from last week, there's a lot that needs to be adjusted when we go play the Packers this coming week, especially offensively. Defense looked great. I thought that the defense was able to come up with clutch plays, and there were several times where the defense was able to make players that were struggling last year shine, and especially in the case of Brooks Reed when you guys go see that video. But here's a quick one for you, Jacob, and I think you can easily point some stuff out here. Is with the Falcons being at home and the Packers coming off a win against a really, really good team, what does that do for the confidence level of the Green Bay Packers going against Falcons team who looked like they were still sleepwalking?
When it comes to game preparation and as far as some of the intangible stuff, the kind of what you're talking about here, Mike McCarthy is one of the best coaches in football, in my opinion, in getting a team ready for a game like this one. If you recall, last year the Packers opened U.S. Bank Stadium in Minnesota, and a game really, the Vikings flew all over the field, and it really seemed like they were going to be able to run away with that game, and the Packers they had the ball late with a chance to win, and Aaron Rodgers threw an interception. This year, it's kind of the same story, except it's Atlanta, which is a better team, in my opinion at least, and they are opening a new stadium. Confidence level after beating the Seahawks should be at an all-time high. McCarthy doesn't let his teams get too high or too low, but he does really always instill confidence in his teams. Last year, I think an example of that would be, they're 4-6, and they had just gotten blown out in back-to-back games, and his quarterback says that he thinks they can win the rest of their games in the regular season. Run the table was the trademark phrase that Rodgers used there. Right. And it's really how the rest of the locker room felt, and that's because of the way that McCarthy coaches his team. So their confidence shouldn't be an issue coming into a game against a team that beat them twice last year, and really the second time they played them, the game wasn't even close. So from a confidence standpoint, It's a daunting task to open a team stadium, especially when the Falcons are a really good team at home. But they won't. If the Packers don't win this game, it won't be from lack of confidence.
This is a huge game, and I was talking to you before we started the show about how the narrative for both of these teams for the entire season will come down to this game. And it's a shame that these two teams have to play so early. It's exciting football. I can't wait to see it. I pay top dollar to go and see it, multiple times a year. But the narrative of these teams, win or lose, will determine how these teams will go forward. And what's your thought on the outside sources talking about these teams going forward after whether Atlanta beats the Packers or they lose to Green Bay?
It's interesting because, we were talking about it beforehand. The Packers just played the Seahawks, a team expected to be at the top of the NFC, and they won. And then now they're coming into play the Falcons, another team expected to be at the top of the NFC. The Packers have a chance to win both of those games and put themselves at least in position to have tiebreakers over two teams that are expected to be toward the top of the NFC. The other one being the Dallas Cowboys, and they play them as well here at the beginning of October. So we talk about all these things, and it's great for early regular season storylines of, could that game come back to matter? But then the reality just is there's 14 more games
right
after this one, regardless of who plays. And, I remember in 2014, the Packers went to Seattle to open the season after the Seahawks and won the Super Bowl, and Seattle trounced them. It was 34-14. That did end up mattering because the Packers had to go to Seattle to play that NFC Championship game. But as every Packers fan knows, the Packers were the better team that day. They just did not win the game. They didn't finish the game. Right. So later in the year, the Packers clearly weren't thinking about week one when they went to that NFC Championship game. If these two teams were to meet again, as good as these two quarterbacks are, I don't think either one of them will be thinking too much about what happened. I mean, even you can look at last year. The Packers played the Falcons to, I think it was 34-32. Or something like that for the final score. It was a really close game. Matt Ryan throws a touchdown to Mohamed Sanu with just a little bit of time left, and Rodgers is unable to get him in position for a bomb field goal attempt. Falcons win that game, and it's close. And then you come to the NFC Championship game, and the game's over by the end of the first quarter because it was 24-0 or something like that. The game was never competitive. So it matters, and it's good for storylines. And obviously, if the two teams finish with the same record, it's going to matter even more. But there's going to be plenty of opportunities for these teams to either trip up or catch the other opponent because there's 14 games left. In football, the NFL, more than any other sport, really is now in any given Sunday week where, even if you're playing the Browns or the Jets or some team like that, those teams jump up and bite you from time to time. So it's a big deal, but, I think more is going to be made of it than what it really is.
Speaking of those two quarterbacks, because you brought that up, really those two quarterbacks are really not thinking about the long term. They're thinking about right now, this week, this team. They're not thinking about all the other implications that could go down the road. They're just thinking about right now and how they can do things. I heard a very interesting little discussion on Undisputed, and I don't want to drop names, but you can pretty much by the tone of how the conversation's going out and the quotes by the conversation, who's talking about what. But one of the panelists, analysts or panel peeps, decided to say that has Matt Ryan caught up to Aaron Rodgers as a talented quarterback, and then another analyst goes, no, that's not the case at all, and in fact, quite the opposite because Matt Ryan has a lot of help and Aaron Rodgers doesn't. Does that really mean anything, Jacob? And in my opinion, very quickly, I think that if your GM builds a strong team, then there's no reason to down the other quarterback who's out there who doesn't have the help. That's the GM's problem, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's weird because this whole Michael Jordan centric, you have to win championship rings and carry a team, quote unquote, to one of those things to be considered great. I think that's unfair to whether it's the quarterback or the players around him, because when, somebody like the misconception that we have here is that, Matt Ryan can't carry a team. He has Julio Jones, Devontae Freeman, Austin Hooper, Mohamed Sanu, Taylor Gabriel, and a really good young defense. That's not fair to Matt because it discredits him. And then you go to the other side the other misconception is, well, that team is Aaron Rodgers and then that is it. The reality is, if a team loses their starting franchise quarterback, that team's going to suck. That's just kind of how it works. And what it does is it makes guys like David Bakhtiari and Jordy Nelson and Clay Matthews and Nick Perry and Mike Daniels and Devontae Adams and Randall Cobb and all these guys, it's like, well, those guys just aren't very good. It's an Aaron Rodgers and an Aaron Rodgers only team. When the reality is, like I said, if a franchise quarterback gets hurt, that team's not going to be very good. And I think we have to get over this idea that a quarterback has to carry a team, or an individual player in any sport has to carry a team in order for them to be great. Matt Ryan, in my estimation, we've talked about this, is coming into the year, I had him as the third best quarterback in football. Rodgers 1, Brady 2, Ryan 3. And I think he's earned that over several years of solid to really good performance. And last year, obviously, culminating with an MVP award. Matt Ryan is not a B-plus quarterback. I think that's an unfair assessment. And to say, well, he has Julio Jones. Well, yeah, but what quarterback wouldn't kill to have Julio Jones on his team? That's not his fault. That's the GM doing a good job of putting a stud receiver with his young franchise quarterback. That's what they did. That's okay. I think that the idea that, we have so many round-the-clock news and sports analysis that people almost have to come up with this really hard, fast, what is now known as a hot take, hard opinion. And there's no new information that can change anything. And whoever says the most ridiculous or edgy or controversial thing, those are the ones that are on TV. That's how you end up with stuff like this. I think it's ridiculous. I think we should just be appreciating great players that are great and realizing that, something like winning a Super Bowl, I just mentioned, these two are the best, in my opinion, the best and the third best quarterback in football. They have one Super Bowl title between them. And I think that's a testament to how hard it is to win a Super Bowl. I mean, the Packers have had Aaron Rodgers healthy forever, the last couple of years, and they haven't been back to the Super Bowl since 2010. Winning a Super Bowl is hard, and people have acted like it's an easy thing, and I think there's a lot of things to blame on that, but a Super Bowl ring or something of that sort should never be a defining trait for a player, in my estimation. Not in a team, at least.
I feel that it's incredibly unfair. And that's a terrible word to use because, it's unfair. That's I know it's childish to say, but it's incredibly unfair to letter grade quarterbacks, wide receivers, running backs, tight ends, whatever, when it comes down to the system that they run, the players supporting them side by side, the other 52 guys that are on a team to help you get from point A to point B, the schedule you play, the coaching staff that you have, and how you use those players. It's incredibly, incredibly biased to go out and letter grade quarterbacks or any position whatsoever to make your narrative stand out. That's ridiculous. And in my opinion, I think that when we do that, we try to compartmentalize too many positions, try to differentiate between this QB X and QB Y. We can't do that. And it's better to put things into groupings than to try to the word I'm looking for is try to separate everything and make it like I'm a Tigger. I'm the only one. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm the only great quarterback here. There's multiple great quarterbacks in this league. And it's hard to win week to week. It's hard to win playoff games. It's hard to win Super Bowls. So I think it's just ridiculous. And especially talking about these two quarterbacks who are two completely different skill sets, to try to say that one quarterback needs to be given a crutch or has a crutch, and the other one, just because his GM's not giving him, or not being a smart GM and trying to do other things like retool a defense, that we should punish one quarterback for smart GMing and praise another for carrying a team. Carrying a team is bad. Carrying a team shouldn't be glorified. Carrying a team is bad. That means that your team is you and only you. So stop. I would say to other people that try to put up that narrative, stop trying to put that narrative up as a positive for a quarterback. That's a negative. And don't use that negative to turn it back into a positive again and go, well, because he's able to carry a team and crutch himself all the way through, and he's the only reason why they're winning stuff, he means that he's a better quarterback than somebody else. Go look at other quarterbacks in the league that, and I didn't want to turn this into a full league-wide thing, but go look at other quarterbacks in the league who are on worse teams, like a Kirk Cousins, who are literally carrying their team and they're bad quarterbacks. They're not good quarterbacks. And to talk about two top quarterbacks, like you were saying, like Aaron Rodgers is probably number one. I agree with you on that statement. And then Tom Brady 2, and Matt Ryan 3. And we're trying to compare like apples and oranges, where like Aaron Rodgers is a mobile quarterback that has athleticism that can get outside and extend plays. Matt Ryan's a pocket passing guy. That's just straight up who it is. And we're trying to like, one gets a crutch and the other one doesn't, and that's a good thing or a bad thing. It's just sloppy reporting, sloppy, like you were saying, it's a hot take thing. It's stupid. So, what did you see in the Packers game against the Seahawks? And what can you tell me about the Nitro defensive package? Because did it work against Seattle? Will it work against Atlanta?
Well, I can tell you, the first thing that obviously jumps off the screen is that, like I said, Mike Daniels lit that offense on fire. And something that comes with the loss of Julius Peppers and Dayton Jones is the fact that the Packers have to put Mike Daniels on the field more to rush the passer, and that appears, at least for right now, to be a good thing. They could not block him. As far as the Nitro package, essentially what that is the Packers play nickel, and they replace one of their inside linebackers, Jake Ryan, Blake Martinez, Joe Thomas, whomever it is that they have on there, with Morgan Burnett. And Kentrell Bryce, an undrafted free agent second-year player, plays the other safety spot next to HaHa Clinton Dix. What it did was put a lot more speed on the field because Kentrell Bryce is faster as a safety than Morgan Burnett, and Morgan Burnett is a faster linebacker than that of either Ryan or Martinez or any of those guys, obviously, because he's a safety. What it does is, in addition to putting more speed on the field, it gives them more favorable matchups and things. The Seahawks were not able to utilize Jimmy Graham as well as they could in the past against Green Bay because instead of a slower linebacker running with him, Morgan Burnett is there. More speed on defense is always going to be a good thing. I think the Falcons are a very good example of that. And, like this week, for example, what it does is instead of having Devontae Freeman or Tevin Coleman matched up with Jake Ryan, you'll have Morgan Burnett being able to do that, and he's more experienced with those things. The Packers have a wide variety of versatile defensive pieces in their back seven, and that's really where the Nitro package comes into play. And they also have a package they didn't use. They call it Sooner, where it's two safeties in that spot. Josh Jones, second-round pick, being the other one next to Morgan Burnett. So they have a lot of versatile pieces. As for if it'll work against the Falcons, listen, the Falcons have a really good offense, and I think this is a test. I think the matchups are there, but, matching up well and executing are two different things. So if the Falcons are able to execute, I don't think the Falcons are going to score 47 points this time around, but but because the Packers won't have Ladarius Gunter covering Julio Jones, and their defense isn't as hobbled as it was going into that Falcons game last year. Not to take anything away from what the Falcons did there, but that's just the reality. The Packers were playing with a slow Ladarius Gunter and a hobbled Demarius Randall and Quentin Rollins. Gunter's not here anymore.
Who will be on Julio Jones, though? That is a question I think most Falcons fans want to know.
I think that's a fair question. I think they'll throw a lot of different guys at him, but if you want a primary guy, I think it'll be Devon House. They brought him back this offseason from Jacksonville. They're playing more man-to-man with him, which suits his skill set, which they weren't doing in Jacksonville. And I'm sure a lot of Falcons fans either remembered or maybe they're trying to forget because I know that season didn't go that well. But in 2014, Atlanta came up to Green Bay, and I call it the Julio Jones game because Julio went bonkers in that game. And the Packers had a deeper secondary that year. They had Sam Shields. They had Casey Hayward. They had Tremont Williams. and they threw all those guys at Jones, and none of them could cover him. And Devon House actually ended up playing against him in that game and had a you're never really too successful against Julio Jones, I guess, but he was more successful than the others. So if I had to venture a guess, I don't think they'll have anyone shadow him specifically. But if they do, it'll be Devon House because that's kind of what they brought him back for. He matches up well with big receivers. It's just a matter of you're never going to stop Julio Jones. You just have to hope to contain him. And the Bears did however they did it, whether the Falcons forgot about him or it was their pass rush, because I know Matt was under pressure a lot last week. The Bears were able to do it, and they did a good enough job to where Julio doesn't break the game open. That's key to the Packers. Don't let Julio run across the middle, stiff arm a cornerback, and end up on SportsCenter highlights for the next 6 months. That's what they did last year.
One of the things that the Bears did really, really well against the Atlanta Falcons was create genuine pressure up the middle. And, I mean, they had some really great players on that defensive line for the Bears, so I give them credit where credit is due, where they took an inexperienced right guard and they showed him welcome to the NFL type deal. And that's where most of the pressure came from, was the right guard. It didn't come from the left-hand side of the line. It didn't come from the right tackle. It came specifically up the middle between the center and the right guard, or on the right-hand side of the right guard, where they just continued to throw defensive tackles and defensive ends and linebackers straight up that gap. And with that being said, because of the pressure, they had to get rid of the ball quicker. And that led to the Atlanta Falcons throwing the ball more to Mohamed Sanu and Taylor Gabriel and over the middle to some of their, or excuse me, out to the sides to some of their running backs. And it also hurt the running game because it made it more predictable. More times than not during that Bears game, if you go look at it, the Falcons were trying to run the clock down and manage the score effectively, not to outscore the Bears, because they just couldn't outscore the Bears because they just couldn't get the time. They didn't have the time to afford to do that. So against the Packers, is there reason to believe as a Falcons fan that there will be more time to throw the ball around because you guys will be coming with smaller guys against us? Or will the Packers try to emulate something that the Bears did, which is abuse the right-hand side of the line?
Kind of the million-dollar question there, isn't it? I mean, he is, can the Packers get pressure on Matt Ryan? Teaser for later. But on that side of the line, I mean, you're talking about Mike Daniels or Dean Lowry, and then Nick Perry or Clay Matthews. And those guys, when they're healthy, are accomplished pass rushers, Perry and Matthews specifically. Daniels looked really good last week. As far as blitz packages and stuff like that, Dom Capers has a lot of those. He didn't use them a whole lot last week because the fear of Russell Wilson taking off and running is always a valid one. Mm-hmm. So not a lot of blitzes came last week. And the reality is if you're able to get home with your front four, you don't have to blitz a whole lot. So the front of that defensive line, the front four, appears to be in pretty good shape for the Packers. The issue where they'll be stressed a little bit this week is Ahmad Brooks, their free agent pickup at the end of training camp, probably not going to play this week because of a concussion. Mm-hmm. So you're looking at Matthews and Perry as your primary rushers, with Kyler Fackrell and then a guy they got on waivers from Atlanta, which is Chris Odom. He didn't play a whole lot last week, if at all. So if there's one way that the Falcons can kind of keep things going is if they wear out that front four by playing up tempo. I think that's a potential key there. But if the Packers can get home with their front four and get the pressure on Ryan that the Bears got last week and that they were able to get on Russell Wilson, I think they're in really good shape because, the reality is if you look back, like the New York Giants secondaries when they won the Super Bowls were not very good. I mean, there wasn't a Chris Harris or someone like that in their secondary. They had a front four that was absolutely dominant and able to get pressure consistently, kind of what you're talking about with what the Bears were able to do last week. So right. That's kind of your million-dollar question. If the Packers can wear out the right side of that offensive line like you're talking about, I think they're in good shape.
The Falcons decided during the Bears game to run the clock and, like I've said a million times now, try to manage the game to where the Bears had to pass the ball more because they needed to get the ball down the field quicker because they were running out of time. And I thought that was one thing that Steve Sarkisian was able to do to create a false sense of security for the Chicago Bears. It took them to the very last play of the game to be able to make something happen. With the fact that the game plan's going to change. The spread offense is probably going to come out for Atlanta. Spreading the ball around is probably going to come out for Atlanta. And you guys are going to have to play more nickel. And also another factoid is that the Falcons weren't able to play their nickel package against the Bears because the Bears started running the ball as one of their only and major options that they had. The Packers have Montgomery and then what at running back to to be able to go against Atlanta? Because if not, then they'll go into nickel package a lot.
Yeah, and I'm interested to see, because last week one of the big discussions you heard all offseason was the Packers in this 2 tight end set with Martellus Bennett and Lance Kendricks, and they kind of shelved it because you have to spread the Seahawks out. One way to keep the Falcons from playing nickel is playing double tight. To answer your question, though, specifically as far as the running backs go, I think Montgomery is on his way to becoming one of the premier backs in this league if he can stay healthy. Because he's big. Everybody gives him this reputation as a scat back because he transferred as a wide receiver. That obviously has been discussed ad nausea. But he's 220 pounds. He's big, he's fast, and he's built. So he's able to take that pounding between the tackles, so to speak. Now, to spell him, last week the Packers used Jamal Williams. He's a 4th-round pick out of BYU. Kind of hard to get the wheels running for some of these rookie running backs. They've all kind of had their moments. There's 3 of them in total. Devontae Mays was a 7th-round pick. And then you have Aaron Jones, who was a 5th-round pick. He probably had the best preseason of the bunch, and he was inactive last week. So it's hard to tell at this point. If the Packers do choose to have a little more run-oriented offense, which would surprise me a little bit just because of who they are and who the head coach is, then it'll be a Montgomery and Jamal Williams tandem there. But I'll be interested to see how the Packers play with their formations, because last week it really was a lot of 3 wide and 1 tight. And this week I do think that there's potential, at least, for having more 2 tight ends, especially considering, from what I've gathered at least, the Falcons struggled a little bit with Jordan Howard and Tariq Cohen. And Cohen is like the hot buzz rookie name of the week.
Yeah.
After he had one really big run, but he had some other pop plays as well. And they caught a lot of passes out of the backfield. So I think, again, not to plug fantasy football too much, but if you have a points per reception league, Ty Montgomery has to be one of your top options this week.
I am starting him this week against my Falcons defense, so Falcons fans, don't be mad at me, but I need the points. So don't score, but go up and down the field all you want. That's fine. That Ty, just keep giving me points. Look, one of the biggest ways for the Atlanta Falcons to be able to stop this Packers team is to spy Aaron Rodgers, because the Packers will go back to the tried and true formula, at least in my opinion, of spreading the ball out and trying to push the Falcons into certain portions of the field and then give Aaron Rodgers the opening to be able to get a couple of yards on a scramble. The last couple times we've played the Packers, last 2 times we played the Packers, we had Vic Beasley or Deion Jones be able to spy Aaron Rodgers, and it worked in our favor. One of the things now that we've added is we've added another outside linebacker in Duke Riley, who was okay. He didn't do enough in this last game for me, at least. He was missing tackles and things of that nature. But he's playing the new will outside linebacker spot. What will Duke Riley be seeing at the will spot, if anything?
Ty Montgomery, Martellus Bennett.
Oh boy, lots of fantasy points.
Those guys in the middle. The Packers, Mike McCarthy, I remember very vividly, the 2015 season was their worst as an offense after Jordy hurt his knee that year, obviously. And their starting tight end tandem that year was Andrew Corliss, who missed some of the year eventually, and then Richard Rodgers was their starter. Richard Rodgers is now their number 3 tight end, because after that year was over, McCarthy comes out and says you need big targets that can run through the middle of the field in a passing game, whether that's a big receiver or a tight end. And that really sticks with me, because the last 2 years, the Packers have signed free agent tight ends. They've signed 3 of them. Jared Cook, who parlayed that into another big deal with Oakland. And then now, obviously, Martellus Bennett and Lance Kendricks. The other thing that's possible, depending on how the Packers play with things and if they catch him in base or something like that, is the resurgence of Randall Cobb. Randall Cobb had a big game last week against the Seahawks. He was the team's leading receiver, And there's been a lot of talk about whether the Packers might move on from him at the end of this year because he hasn't lived up to his contract, which I think is malarkey, but I mean, that's a separate discussion. But Riley, I think you're going to see those three guys specifically: Montgomery as a pass catcher, Martellus Bennett as a pass catcher, and then obviously Randall Cobb if they can catch him in a favorable matchup.
I watched the Falcons offense last week, and not to reiterate for the 100th time over, but the way that they played the game was that of leaving certain individuals out of the game. And Julio Jones caught a couple passes, but he wasn't targeted enough, in my opinion. The running backs were not targeted in the passing game as much as we were promised. And then only 2 catches for, I mean, they were big catches, but 2 catches for Austin Hooper. One with that stiff arm down at the end where he scored. And so I think that Austin Hooper is going to get a lot more targets when it comes to this game. That could be one of the big factors for the Atlanta Falcons. Spoiler alert, key to the game, get the ball to Austin Hooper and Julio Jones if the Falcons want to be able to win this game. The Falcons need to spread this out and be able to utilize Julio Jones and Austin Hooper. And you've been talking about, House being there and kind of being on him, and then maybe some bracket coverage over the top, which I always recommend against Julio Jones. If you want to be able to stop Julio Jones, bracket coverage, put your best corner on the team on Julio, and just make him a non-factor. That being said, when you do that kind of stuff, when you put your best against Julio Jones, you leave the smaller corners or the lower talent corners on guys like Mohamed Sanu, Tyler Gabriel, and Austin Hooper and Julio Jones, or excuse me, Devontae Freeman. So this is going to be a really interesting matchup. I'm excited because there could be a change of how Atlanta does things, the things that didn't work from last week, kind of getting a change up for this game against the Packers. We know we need to spread the ball out more, and the Packers changing their formula. We may see some of their nitro package, but we may see a lot of their base package just be able to get the pressure constantly on Ryan if they do try to run the ball more, which was the run game. Let me be honest with you, Jacob, that run game didn't look great. There was only 56, I think 52 or 56 yards for Atlanta against the Bears, and they were playing like a 3-4, and now we've got this multi-sub nitro package that everybody's talking about with the Packers, and that's throwing extra safeties on the field and extra corners on the field and just speed. So I'm excited about this game. I'm really, really excited about the importance of this game, the intricate details of this game, the 2 head coaches that are going against each other, and the battle of the minds, and the 2 quarterbacks in this game that could possibly cement themselves with this game. And like I said early in the show, it's unfortunate that they have to meet so early, and unfortunate that the narrative will be set by this game for either team. But it's exciting to see these 2 quarterbacks be able to get together and go. Matt Ryan, Aaron Rodgers, possibly the number 1 and number 3 quarterbacks in the league going against each other in a no-holds-bar match. We could see a huge score fest, or we could see 13-10. So I'm really excited about this game. I think both of us unbiasedly are excited that this game is happening because we really like this matchup. It's a very, very good game. Your final thoughts on the Packers, your keys to the game, and then plug your stuff, man.
Yeah, I mean, the first thing for me is always, and it's going to be whenever you play a top-tier quarterback, which, as I've mentioned, Matt Ryan is, I always think the biggest key is to put him on his back or put him off his spot if you can't put him on his back. So, I've said all offseason, even with the stuff with the cornerbacks, I thought the biggest concern for the Packers was their pass rush. And last week at least cooled some of those concerns, but let's see if they can do it against, let's face it, I mean, at this point, Seattle has a little league offensive line. And the Falcons, while a little unexperienced on that right side, as you've mentioned, Jake Matthews is still very good. They still have a pretty good interior. This is a better offensive line that they're going to face. My key is, can they put Matt Ryan on his back? And then On the offensive side of things, well, actually, one more thing on the defensive side of things, because you kind of mentioned it, is, you're talking about that run defense that the Bears played last week. The Packers actually had a very good run defense of their own. Eddie Lacy, 5 carries, 3 yards. The Seahawks didn't get anything going in their run game.
Time out. We're talking about Eddie Lacy, though.
Well, yeah, that's fair, and I understand that. But, I mean, the Seahawks threw a variety of backs at the Packers, and none of them could get going. Their best run of the day was a Russell Wilson scramble on a broken play. So if that's how you're doing in the run game, that's got to feel pretty good for the Packers defense. So on the run game side of things, yeah, that matters. But the reality is, in a game like this, it almost always comes down to the quarterbacks. They got to put Ryan off of his spot, and they got to put him under pressure. Hopefully, at least on my end, they're able to do that and beat up some of those guys in the interior. Offensively, listen, I don't know if this is an issue, if you want to call it that, or if the Falcons are just, they're willing to let you do those things, and that's why this happens. But, the Falcons led the league last year in receptions given up to a running back. And their run defense as well, some of this because they were ahead in a lot of their games, but some of it because of the way they play their defense as well, is the ability to run the ball to win the game after you've gotten a lead. So, I mean, I think if the Packers, Ty Montgomery is my guy for this week. If the Packers are going to win, I think Montgomery has to have a big game, both as a receiver and as a running back, because the matchups dictate certain things. And the other reality is the Packers have at least a hobbled left tackle. David Bakhtiari is probably going to play, but Brian Bulaga is questionable. He didn't play last week, and Vic Beasley on a fast surface is terrifying to me against Kyle Murphy. With all due respect, he did some good things last week, but I don't think he'll be able to hold up against Vic Beasley throughout the course of a game. So I think they have to use their quick passing game with Ty Montgomery and be able to run the ball at least effectively enough to slow down some of that pass rush. And I think Montgomery's up to the challenge, but I think it's a big spot. So it'll be an interesting standpoint. So defense, as I said, rush the passer and either move him off a spot or put it on his back. If they do that, I think they have a good chance to at least hold the Falcons down. I don't know if you stop them, but you can hold them down. And then on offense, use 88 as much as you can. And Dan, that'll help your fantasy team as well. But yeah, check me out. I have some stuff for you. We will actually have some stuff for you guys once this game ends and is over. We'll have some film breakdown for you, minus Pulse of the Pack. So go ahead and check that out. Give me a subscribe. I'll give you fantasy people, and I'll give you like the nitty-gritty stuff too. My videos last week, as I mentioned, were Ty Montgomery and Mike Daniels. So a nitty-gritty Mike Daniels and a fantasy-type option in Ty Montgomery. So check it out, and it should be an interesting game definitely on this Sunday to break down once Monday hits.
Very quickly before we end the show, I just wanted to say that Vic Beasley on a fast surface, you're right. I'm gonna point to that and say, you're right. Having Vic Beasley on a fast surface, Grady Jarrett on a fast surface, Don Terry Poe on a fast surface is kind of scary. But the Falcons weren't able to play. They played in their base package 60% of the time in the Bears game, and 60% of the time is a lot. But the Falcons like to be in nickel package, and that brings on Takk McKinley. I don't know. I'll show you after this. I'll show you the Takk McKinley play, and then you can tell me what you think will happen if he gets more playing time. But Takk McKinley on a fast surface is even scarier, and he wasn't on a fast surface last week, and he looked scary. So that's just something I want to point out to Falcons fans. Takk McKinley's going to play more this week. He only had 12 snaps, and he had 2 pressures and almost a sack. So just letting everybody know, it's going to be interesting. I got Brooks Reed film for you guys either tonight or tomorrow morning. I just want to let you guys know, without it being a really long, drawn-out, woe is me type thing, that I just have felt like my content that I was trying to make for you guys it just wasn't up to par and wasn't good enough. And I feel like if you guys respect that, then you'll know where I am right now as a YouTube creator, as somebody that likes to put out content, that I felt that I wasn't doing the best I possibly could for you guys. So that's why I withheld the content and have reworked it and talking to my design team and kind of going from there. So that content will be out as soon as it possibly can, and then I'll have Pulse of the Pack with me, Jacob, to be able to do a breakdown of the Falcons and Packers, and that tape will be out very quick, and will be done very, very well, very informative. Jacob, thank you for coming on the show. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Dan. Hopefully we can do this again for an NFC Championship game at Lambeau.
That would be great, as long as it's actually in the bins. So, stick around with me, Jacob. I'll talk to you right after the show. Thank you, everybody, for coming to the show. I really appreciate you guys supporting the channel. We're almost at 1,000. We're almost at 1,000 subs, and we will do a 1,000 sub party, 2.5-hour program. For you guys, to celebrate you guys for doing everything for this channel. So spread the word about the channel. We'll continue to work hard. Make sure you guys go visit Pulse of the Pack. I put it in the description in the video, as well as in the comment section. I'll put that in there as well. Visit Jacob. I appreciate you guys, and I think I will talk to you guys later, right after the Atlanta Falcons game against the Green Bay Packers. Peace out. Grease out.